This is an NJN News special report. Governor Corzine's State of the State address.
Hello, I'm Kent Manahan, and welcome to NJN's coverage of Governor Corzine's State of the State speech. The governor will speak to a joint session of the legislature gathered at the State House in Trenton. This will be Jon Corzine's second State of the State address as governor. This will be the first time the governor will publicly discuss the details of his long-awaited asset monetization plan. NJN News senior political correspondent Michael Aron is standing by in the Assembly chambers, where the governor is expected to arrive soon. Michael, some of the details of the plan are already out there.
That's right, Kent. There was a briefing for the press this morning. The plan the governor's going to outline today calls for a 50% hike in tolls every four years, beginning in the year 2010. There won't be any toll hikes for the first 2 years. There's also a cost of living hike thrown in there. The average toll today is said to be $1.20. Under this plan, it would be $12.50 in 25 years. The plan would bring in $32 to $38 billion immediately, thereby reducing the state's annual debt service by nearly $1 billion, freeing up $1 billion in the budget each year. And it would guarantee $1.6 billion, considered a hefty amount, for transportation improvements every year for the next 75 years. I'm joined now by Brigid Harrison of Monclair State University. Brigid, this is said to be a tough sell for the governor to the people of the state and the legislators. What's your view on that?
Oh, it's a very tough sell. I think that all of the state's residents and many of the legislators are very skeptical about the idea of borrowing further to get us out of debt. I think the delivery matters today for the governor. He's got a tough sell, and he's got to be up to the task to convince these folks.
How smart is it to postpone the first toll hike until after the next gubernatorial and assembly election?
Well, he didn't get elected governor because he's a dumb man. I think that was a smooth move. I think the other important thing is the call on a limit on the state's borrowing unless it's approved by voters. I think that that's another key component here.
That's right. There are some other points in the plan, including a freeze on state spending. The governor is going to say in this speech that he's going to have to cut $2 billion to $2.5 billion out of this year's budget. How will that go down here?
I don't know how well it'll go down with legislators. I think that that's something that the public is interested in. Lots of times what we're hearing is we need to cut back on spending. We shouldn't be borrowing so much if we have a bloated government. I think that the governor needs to convince voters that the cuts will be strategic and that people's quality of life won't be impaired.
And finally, how much is riding on this speech from your point of view?
Well, the governor has said that his political career is riding on this speech, and so he put it out there. I don't know that he can't recover from a bad job, but this certainly can make or break his gubernatorial term.
Okay, Brigid Harrison, thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Kent, the governor is not in the chamber yet. The two legislative leaders are at the front of the room. Why don't we go back to you, and we'll come back here when the governor arrives.
All right, Michael, we can do that. I'd like to turn now to NJN's two veteran political insiders, Republican political analyst Roger Bodman, here in our NJN studios, and Democratic political analyst Julie Roginsky. Welcome to you both, and thanks for being here to share your perspectives on this day of the governor's second State of the State address. Julie, to begin with you, we've heard so many people on both sides of the aisle say that this is a defining moment in the Corzine administration. How important is this speech today for the governor?
It's critical, but what's more important is this job of going out to 21 counties and selling this to the actual voters who have to vote for him in 2 years. Essentially on this issue, he has run to right the ship of state. He has come in as a fiscal expert, and he has to sell this plan to the public, which I think is going to be a very tough sell. But he's going to have to sell this to the public by saying, look, we have a mess. It's a bipartisan mess that we've gotten into. This is the only way possible to get us out of it.
We've been hearing about this plan for a year at least, Roger. Right. What will the Republicans be looking for today in terms of the details and what can be expected out of what we know of this asset monetization monetization plan?
Well, I think their first reaction is going to be how ironic it is that we're borrowing money to pay down debt. In other words, we're borrowing to get out of debt. It's inconsistent. But having said that, there'll be pieces of this speech I think that they can support. Some of the programs or outlines that the governor is likely to make regarding spending controls, borrowing controls. In other words, asking the public to vote on these things, vote on indebtedness and bond questions. That hasn't happened a lot in the past, Kent. But the devils are in the details, as they say, and you have to look at what type of when you look at that bonded indebtedness and how those bonds are issued and what the voters get to vote on. Are independent authorities included, or like the Turnpike Authority or other authorities if they exist in the future?
What's going to happen to them?
In other words, who gets to actually issue that debt, and what does the voter get to vote on? I mean, those are the devils that the details, I should say, that the devils perhaps as well, but the devils in the details, as I say, and those are the questions that the Republicans.
Julie, you're shaking your head, but has the governor set up really an enormous expectation on the part of this plan, because we've been hearing about it for so long and so little has come out about it until just recently?
Tremendously, but look, I think Roger and I were both here on election night, and what we saw is a very sophisticated electorate who said enough is enough. We shot down stem cell research bonds because people are tired of debt.
An issue that the governor challenged and campaigned
and
on.
an issue that the people of New Jersey overwhelmingly support. So I think what we're seeing now is people waking up and saying, look, enough with the gimmicks, enough with the rhetoric. As the governor is going to say in a speech today, we need to get down to brass tacks. And Roger's right, the devil is in the details, but I think the voters are sophisticated enough to know that we have a hole in this, maybe the only way to get out of it.
But that's the exact question.
This is a very difficult plan involving $40 billion.
Exactly. We're talking huge numbers. I mean, just to put in perspective, the pension bond deal, which was much maligned, and the governor mentions in his speech, I understand, was about $3 billion. This is almost 10 times that. And the question is Julie gets it right. In these 21 county meetings, I gather, the governor
which are to begin this weekend on Saturday in Livingston, Essex County.
Right. He's got to explain to the people that borrowing $40 billion is good for us. Keep in mind, we are borrowing money today that our children and grandchildren in 2022 and beyond are going to be paying in toll hikes.
Isn't this
Somehow
what we said we
that.
shouldn't be doing any more of in New Jersey when we've seen this kind of borrowing in the past at not near these kinds of levels, Julie?
I think that's what the governor is going to have to explain, and he's a much smarter economic person than I could ever hope to be, but he's going to have to explain to people why borrowing in this way is preferable to continuing this huge structural debt that we've had. He's going to have to be a salesman in chief. He's not going to just have to be the governor. He's going to have to be the best salesman New Jersey's ever seen in order to get the public to go along with him. The other thing I will say, though, Roger, you'll agree, is we cannot continue on the path we're going down. And I think clearly what he has to get across is the fact that we have roads that need to be paved. We have all sorts of obligations that are not going to be met unless we do something drastic. And this is probably the only thing that we can do that is going to accomplish those issues.
And clearly, the governor will, if this plan doesn't go forward, or if Republicans or Democrats, and mind you, there are a good number of Democrats that have concerns about this, some of whom campaigned against the concept, in last fall's elections. So the bottom line is that the governor's got to be able to sell this thing, and he presumably will challenge the opponents, be they Republican or Democrat, to say, all right, fine, if you don't want to do this, what are you going to do?
The problem with the governor has been that everybody's been talking about this asset monetization plan, as we've been calling it, for the past year, but the administration has not released any information. So what you've got now is the Republicans running very successfully in some cases last year on a plan that was never discussed. The voters obviously got their point of view across, the Republican point of view. Now it's time for the governor to not only get his point of view across, but take what the Republicans said and really sell to the public as to why they're wrong. And he's right.
Well, this is a plan that we might feel that is in some ways been the last year in the making, certainly in the last many months in the making, in the governor and his senior staff that have helped to develop it. Does the public deserve an independent analysis of this plan before it actually is enacted? And will the details be out there to allow for that, whether it's the experts at some of our educational institutions in the state or others who would analyze this?
We're really talking about two different problems. We're talking about state indebtedness, $32 billion worth of debt currently, and we're talking about annual budget deficits. It's a different issue. Obviously, they're interrelated because if the higher your mortgage payment is and your annual debt service, the bigger chunk of your annual budget it eats up. So as Michael Aron pointed out, if this thing passes, presumably $1 billion in the annual budget would be saved. Anyway, having said that, the governor has to go out and sell this. Now, presumably he'll bring in, whether it's academics, Wall Street experts, financial types of all kinds that have credibility with the public and say, listen, if we don't do this, here's where this state is headed, and
or
here's
at least
what it
to help
means.
explain it also to the public, because it is such a complicated issue.
And the governor himself is a financial expert. You may agree or not agree with him, but he is a financial expert. I think his job is going to have to be not to talk as the former chairman of Goldman Sachs, who speaks in numbers and in terms that most people aren't familiar with, and really, really get down and explain to people exactly how this is going to work in terms that the rest of us can understand. That's a very challenging thing. This is a very complicated deal.
I mean, it's a tough sell. Republicans are going to be looking for further cuts. I mean, Assembly Minority Leader Alex DeCroce has offered up substantial and detailed cuts in each and every budget year for the last 4 or 5 in a row, up to $2.5 billion of detailed cuts of how they would reduce government spending. I mean, keep in mind, just yesterday, in the dark of night in the state legislature, they passed a new school funding program that spends $532 million more.
With Republican help.
With some outgoing Republicans voting for it.
Not just outgoing,
but nonetheless, the point being, the money have already spent $532 million in next year's budget when the governor says he's going to keep the budget flat.
Well, we know that there will be some Republican, if not a lot of Republican resistance, perhaps, for this. What about the Democrats, Julie? How difficult of a sell is this going to be for Democratic legislators, to the Democratic legislators?
It's a tough sell. Roger and I were just talking about the fact that he wants to put the governor wants to put a toll road on Route 440. Well, Route 440 happens to include the district that John Wisniewski, the chairman of the Transportation Committee, in the Assembly is the chair. He's going to have to get John Wisniewski to go along with that. That may be something that's negotiable for him. Clearly, this is the governor having to sell this to the public, to the legislature on both sides of the aisle. This is by no means a Democratic slam dunk.
And you look at folks, legislators that have districts that are up and down the Parkway or the Turnpike. The Parkway tolls, as I understand it, to go from roughly 35 cents, what it is now currently, to $1.60 in 2018. Now, presumably goes higher after that. So if you're a legislator that represents a district that's somewhere between Bergen County and Cape May, where that Parkway runs up and down north-south in our state, you're going to have to think long and hard about this, about how your constituents are going to react to those types of pre-scheduled, understood, here, they're coming down the road, folks, make no mistake about it, toll hikes.
Will there be numbers out there for us to know more about the numbers of people who use the Parkway? Because we've heard, and the Turnpike, who use it to commute to work, because we've heard so much about the fact that the out-of-staters will bear the brunt of these toll increases, particularly on the Turnpike.
My understanding is about 53% of Turnpike users roughly are out-of-staters.
But in what counties and where and who will be directly impacted?
I'm sure they'll try to come up with that kind of
All
argument.
right, we'll pick up on this point shortly. I'm being told the governor is just about to begin. I'm going to send it now back to Michael Aron at the State House in Trenton for the governor's State of the State address. Michael?
That's right, Kent. Assembly Speaker Joe Roberts just introduced Senate President Cody. Let's go down to the podium.
13th legislature that the governor has arrived. My colleagues, our honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pleasure to present the governor of the state of New Jersey, the Honorable Jon S. Corzine.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. I wish it were always so. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really terrific to be with you, Reverend Clergy, and Your Eminence Metropolitan Evangelos and Reverend Kopas. Thank you for joining us today. Senate President Cody, Speaker Roberts, Majority Leader Sweeney, Majority Leader Watson-Coleman, Minority Leaders Kean and DeCroce. I know. Where's Tom? Here he is. Congratulations. Chief Justice Rabner, members of the Supreme Court, former Governors Byrne and Florio and DeFrancisco and Bennett. Thank you all for joining us. Members of the legislature, fellow citizens, may I wish you and all New Jerseyans a happy New Year. As you might imagine, being here for this year's State of the State is most certainly a blessing for me. Maybe not for you, but it is for me. I hope all New Jerseyans will accept my deep gratitude for their prayers and expressions of good faith, goodwill during a painful 2007. And I really do hope this new year will bring good health and happiness to our citizens, and may we all come together as partners to improve the quality of life of those we serve. Congratulations to the newly elected members. With your presence, the legislature will far better represent the diversity of our most diverse state. I must say it's particularly exciting to see the presence of 13 new women members, a long tradition overdue. I'm sure you'll argue with me as much as the guys do. To my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I look forward to an open and honest dialogue, one that will lead to a better life for the people of New Jersey. Let us set our expectations high. Our people deserve no less. Lastly, let me thank the members of the just concluded legislative session for your diligence and productivity. I particularly want to recognize the group among those veterans who served long time the people of New Jersey, and they did it with integrity and care, and I think we all should give them a round of applause. The work of the past session demonstrated that on issues ranging from the stubborn to the intractable to the long-standing, that when we put the common good first, we can make progress. Last night, the 212th legislature, on a truly bipartisan basis, took on an issue, ducked and debated for years, and passed a historically, educationally sound, and I certainly hope a constitutionally appropriate school aid formula. This new formula will improve all of our schools. It will help unify our citizens, and it will demonstrate to the public that government can work to provide for the common good. On many other fronts, we took on the challenges our people face, and we made progress together, providing property tax relief to over 1.8 million homeowners, capping property tax levies at 4%, establishing an independent state controller, creating the mechanisms to pursue shared services and consolidation, setting a national standard for limiting greenhouse gas emissions, expanding the earned income tax credit to 300,000 additional New Jerseyans, placing more foster children into new homes than ever before, providing access to affordable health care for every child in New Jersey, ending dual office holding, bringing transparency to a flawed budget process, and abolishing the death penalty. I could go on. Much was done, much is left to do. But make no mistake, no matter how serious the challenges, no matter the angst, there's not a day that goes by that I don't smile with the pride at being the governor of the state of New Jersey. The naysayers are flat out wrong. Our New Jersey is a special place, a great place for our families and our children. Yes, we appropriately speak to those things that need to change or know are wrong, but New Jersey has much to celebrate. Yes, our citizens are challenged with heavy costs for everyday life, but our people's earnings are among the highest on the globe. Yes, we worry about the state of our economy, but New Jersey has one of the highest employment rates in the nation and carries competitive edges in America's fastest growing and most vital industries: medical research, logistics, finance, high technology, gaming. Yes, we need to make every school one of excellence, but we do lead the nation in preschool enrollment, produce top scores for fourth graders, record the best high school graduation rate, and have among the best colleges and universities in the nation. We know the world's becoming more competitive, but New Jersey has the best educated citizenry in America, with the most graduate degreed citizens per capita. My point, and the fact is, the best part of our state is our people. Yes, we have our fair share of rock stars, 2 members of the U.S. Supreme Court, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, a Nobel Prize winner or 2, Yogi Berra, and the boss and Bon Jovi. But most New Jerseyans aren't famous or hold high positions of public profile. Most are simply hardworking men and women who do extraordinary things on a daily basis. For me, the biggest challenge of being a public servant is trying to live up to the standards our people set. Consider just last month, Paul Navone, a retired factory worker who never earned more than $11 an hour, committed to donate $2 million to New Jersey's higher education community. Paul, would you stand up? Paul is Consider Brian Morgenstern, a responsible young Circuit City clerk who saw suspicious activity in his store on a video machine and alerted authorities to a possible terrorist attack. Brian, stand up. It's great to see you. Thank you. These guys really are heroes. Consider the classy coach, Vivian Stringer, and the Rutgers women's basketball team who stared down indignity with character and pride. I think Vivian's at practice right now, but it was a remarkable moment of character and pride. Consider this June. This coming June, 3,200 proud members of New Jersey's National Guard will rotate into active service in Iraq, following nearly 7,000 others who've served in the past 5 years. And you know what? I have yet to hear complaint one from any of them. Keep in mind, tragically, 104 New Jerseyans have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation in Iraq and Afghanistan. Can there be a greater inspiration for any of us to pursue the common good than the examples and the lives of our people? Every day, the citizenry of our state set the standard for hard work, financial responsibility, and selflessness. The responsibility of those of us in public life is to live up to those standards, not political party, not party discipline, not political popularity. We need to live up to the standards set by the people who wake and make up New Jersey. Regrettably, far too often the conduct of some and the collective actions of the whole have let our people down. Too many office holders have betrayed the public trust, while too many financial decisions have been taken ignoring the consequences of the actions. Today, the public is frustrated. They are angry about the standards of conduct of government, and most of us know they're right. I sure do. If anyone doubts the public's frustration, honestly evaluate the results of this fall's elections, including the depressingly low participation rate. The public is upset, and they don't much trust us with the public's purse strings. I can't blame them. The public literally has paid and continues to pay a very high tariff for their government's repeated failure to act financially responsible. It's up to all of us in this room to change the credit card culture of New Jersey's finances. In short, our fiscal practices, balance sheet, and most vitally, our culture must be restructured. Unless we do, our options, our priorities, and our future will be continually constrained, too often limiting the potential of our citizens by what we can't do because we can't afford the price. You know, I actually dream giving a State of the State or a budget speech that has applause lines because we're doing something. I really do. There are many policy initiatives and priorities I'd love to work on. It pains me, I know it does Senator Vitale and others, that we're not delivering universal health care, providing sufficient equity dollars to our urban centers like Newark and Camden and across the state, or offering additional operating support to state-run colleges and universities. Unfortunately, the overarching priority, the #1 issue facing our state, is fixing our financial foundation. It's the primary threshold we must cross if we're to stop punishing our taxpayers. We're in a hole, and if we want to get out, we have to stop digging. Don't misread me. The operations of government won't stop. They can't. Restructuring doesn't mean we're not going to implement our anti-crime plan. We must. Restructuring doesn't mean we can't reduce the state's energy consumption or produce alternative supplies. It's imperative. Restructuring doesn't mean we're not going to enact family leave insurance. We should. Doesn't mean we can't produce more affordable housing or provide senior living in home settings. We will. And it doesn't mean that we don't finally ban pay-to-play and in-wheeling at all levels of government. Now is the moment. Yes, these are important priorities, but these responsibilities are not remotely as pressing as resetting our state's financial foundation. In fact, if we don't fiscally restructure, we will soon lose the capacity to deliver the services we currently provide. And when we do restructure, it shouldn't be for the next 50 weeks. It ought to be for the next 50 years. I say all this because talking about our state's finances is a little like watching the movie Groundhog Day. Each year, in the first quarter, we revisit the budget crisis soap opera over and over and over. I've gone back and reviewed all the speeches, not only in my administration, but others. I'm tired of it, you're sick of it, and I know the public is fed up with it. The only difference now is that the crisis has morphed into a financial emergency and poses a direct threat to New Jersey's quality of life. For nearly 20 years, both parties bonded, begged, and borrowed money from every pot we could find to fund a growing appetite for spending. Some was necessary, some was less so. Each time a fiscal apocalypse seemed likely, a budget was cobbled together that looked balanced, but was really bleeding red ink. Taxes were raised, fees were increased, trust funds were raided, pension liabilities went unfunded, spending gimmicks were found, and bonded indebtedness swelled to $32 billion. The ongoing deficits didn't disappear. They were just stuffed into the closet. The eventual cost for the taxpayer went higher and higher. With $32 billion in bonded debt, New Jersey citizens have a higher debt burden than virtually all other states. Every man, woman, and child in New Jersey personally owes $3,700 of that debt, about 3 times higher than the national average. The first $860 our citizens pay in state taxes doesn't go to fund school aid or public safety. It goes for interest and debt payments. These numbers will grow dramatically in the years ahead if we accept the status quo. Beyond the bonded debt, there's another $25 billion in unfunded pension liabilities and an estimated $60 billion in future health care costs for retirees. By any standard, legal or economic, these debts are our obligations to pay. When you combine those unfunded liabilities with the bonded debt, it really gets scary. A $45,000 obligation per household. And I see a number of our congressional friends here. I welcome you and thank you all for being here, Rush, and all of the friends across the board. If you look at the federal numbers, it's only about $30,000. We have a very heavy debt load. Funding this broadly defined debt is a $5 billion bite out of today's budget, or 15% of the total, and it's growing. To fully fund these obligations today, if we did it on the balance sheet today, it would be an incredible $10 billion, crowding out new initiatives and seriously undermining our ability to provide the services now offered. Fortunately, our debt is only part of the problem. Growth in state spending has regularly surpassed the expected growth in revenue. For over a decade, base revenues have been increasing on an average 2 to 3% a year, but spending has increased 6 to 7%, leaving us with a compounding deficit which today approaches $3 billion. Even when we've raised new revenues, it has rarely been used to close the gap. From the decision to cut taxes while increasing spending, to the decision to float the pension bonds in 1997, to the commitment in 2001 to increase pension benefits without paying for them, through the tobacco securitization bonds, followed by substantial borrowing for operating costs, the financial emergency became inevitable. Whatever reforms are required, we have to put an end to the financial culture that allowed the proliferation of spending, borrowing, and mismanagement to take hold of our state's finances. For one, I'm strictly interested in transformational change, change that will create a different set of economic possibilities for our taxpayers. We must recognize we're at the end of the line on the ways of the past. Today, I'm presenting a restructuring proposal to end the era of financial imbalance and fiscal mismanagement once and for all. I want to put aside the rhetoric and have an honest discussion about the ideas that will actually get our state's finances back on track. I fully expect these reforms to be controversial. That's fine, because it means we're having the discussion, the right discussion. So let's get started. The plan has 4 elements. First, I'll introduce a budget in February that freezes spending at this year's current level. Second, for future budgets, spending will not be allowed to exceed recurring revenue growth. Third, we'll capture the value in our toll roads to pay down 50% of the state's debt and fund statewide transportation investments for a generation. And finally, all future debt issue without a dedicated revenue source must be approved by the voters. These 4 elements address the financial ills that have enabled the embedded credit card culture to flourish. The benefits of the restructuring plan are powerful and straightforward. It resets our base budget to match recurring revenues to ongoing spending. It prevents a return to overspending. It pays down the debt by a half. It eliminates the structural deficit. And it creates the foundation for economic development, job growth, and honest government. If we do this right, there will be no ability to backslide into bad habits. We will, so to speak, keep the manure out of the barn. Let me turn to the individual elements. First, I'll freeze overall state spending for the next fiscal year. This is fairly straightforward and tough. As noted, government led by both parties and both branches has spent more than comes in. Now, in order to make up, or should I say catch up, we need a timeout on new spending to even out available revenue with current spending. I don't expect this to be easy or painless. It means finding $2 to $2.5 billion in cuts for the budget I'll propose in February. Over the past 2 years, we've significantly reduced the gap between spending and recurring revenues, and that hasn't been easy. Besides adding revenue, we've started to get the growth of fixed costs under control. Through our efforts in collective bargaining, we've raised the retirement age for new state employees from 55 to 60. We increased the pension contributions by state employees. We kept salary increases well inside the levy cap. We instituted a defined contribution plan for elected officials and higher income employees. And for the very first time, all state employees are contributing to their health care costs. We shrunk the payroll through attrition by 2,000 positions and are maintaining a tough hiring freeze in most areas of government. We reduced the use of one-shot revenues and ended the raid on the unemployment insurance fund. And together with the legislature, we brought transparency to the budget process and sharply reduced Christmas tree spending. Now we must go the rest of the way in any reliance on one-time revenues, particularly unanticipated surpluses, to support ongoing spending. These adjustments will be painful, but they will pave the way to long-term stability. Now, as we tackle this task, this difficult task of resetting spending, I'll ask our people in Treasury and the departments to seek the formal advice of a bipartisan group of legislators from both houses where additional cuts might occur, and that will be done before we present a budget. To reach the restructuring objective, we all have to work together. The second element of my plan addresses the means to sustain the hard-earned stability. In addition to the first-year freeze, I'll propose legislation that will prohibit incremental spending levels from exceeding certified recurring revenues. The rate of expected revenue growth will put a limit on spending growth. Simple initiative will effectively end spending one-shots and with it end the culture of living beyond our means that has us nourished. So from this point forward, any non-recurring revenues or build-up surplus will be exclusively used to pay down debt, make capital investments, or pay off unfunded health care or retirement liabilities. No more spending programs built on one-time revenue flows. No more use of one-time revenues to fund ongoing operations. From now on, recurring revenues, not just total revenues, must match recurring expenses. Third, we'll capture the value of our toll roads to pay down at least 50% of state debt and fund transportation improvements. I know everyone wants to hear about this initiative and the toll schedule, but let me first talk about the final element of the plan, and then we'll return to this piece more extensively. Super secret. The fourth element of my plan is to give voters the final say on new debt, just like the Constitution intended. The public must be put back in charge of the state's credit card. Borrowing must be done sparingly and only for prudent long-term needs that can be justified and stand up to public scrutiny. Unfortunately, the ability to borrow is a privilege that's been abused to the point the public has pretty much told us they no longer trust our judgment. The defeat of an issue as popular as stem cell research, along with the narrow approval of open space, should have been a wake-up call for all of us. Was for me. Make no mistake, medical research and open space were not the problem. Lack of confidence in the financial management of the state was. We can all agree it should never have gotten to this point. For nearly 200 years, our state constitutions have explicitly barred borrowing without voter approval. Somewhere along the line, the meaning of that requirement got totally lost. The state, under both Democratic and Republican leadership, has made an end run around the voter approval requirement by issuing billions in contract debt without that approval. Since 1990, approximately $24 billion in contract debt has been issued. while voter-approved debt has stayed flat at $3 billion, a time frame that coincides precisely with the sharp deterioration in our state's finances. To return to constitutional intent, I am proposing an amendment that ends this easy access to borrowing. As Senator Lance and Lesniak have advocated, the public should authorize all borrowing that does not have a dedicated source of revenue. Let me give emphasis in review. Limiting spending to revenue growth and voter-approved borrowing are truly 50-year, not 50-week reforms. Now, let me return to the super-secret asset monetization plan. I know full well this is the tough love part of the restructuring, and my recommendation doesn't come lightly. It's simply the best available option. I have two objectives with the toll roll element of the plan. First, cut the state's overall bonded debt in half. This means we pay back in short order $16 billion or more in debt and reduce the annual debt payments by about $1 billion. One fell swoop, we wipe out 1/3 of the structural deficit. The resulting benefit for our taxpayers and budget balance are self-evident. Second objective of the plan is to provide a long-term funding source for statewide transportation needs across New Jersey's broad multimodal transportation network. As you know, we have massive transportation demands, but no money after 2011 to meet them. We're a densely populated corridor state that's absolutely dependent on our transportation network for quality of life and our economic well-being. In the next 10 years, we have over 10,000 miles of highways that need to be resurfaced so that in turn we can save drivers hundreds of millions in vehicle repairs, reduce time lost in congestion, and make the roadways safe. We have 700 bridges, deficient bridges, that need repairs, and we shouldn't wait for a tragedy to motivate us to fix them. We need to expand mass transit so as to get cars off the roads and carbon out of the air, be it light rail into Gloucester County or the northern branch through Bergen County. I guess we got a few Bergen County people here, right, Joe? We should widen the Atlantic City Expressway to support the expected $15 billion of new investments and thousands of private jobs in tourism and gaming coming in the next decade. The public has been promised a widening of both the Turnpike and the Parkway, but there's no money to pay for it. And the state needs by this summer, again, I reference you to our congressional delegation, a source certain of $3 billion to move forward with the monumental Hudson Tunnel, or we will risk losing matching federal dollars that make the $7 billion plus investment possible. The same match issue is true for the nearly $2 billion in annual transportation funding we get from Washington. All in all, we need close to $40 billion over the next 10 years to fix and expand our bridges, roads, and mass transit systems. The truth is, we have few practical ideas of where the money will be found. As a 30-year veteran of financial markets, I know there's no magic to finance. No plan, no investment comes without cash. I want to be clear and honest up front. My plan involves significant toll hikes. Those toll hikes will be predictable, fair, and reflect increases in the cost of living, past, present, and into the future. Toll increases will be imposed equally on all users, a majority of whom are commercial and out-of-state drivers. Toll increases will reflect a maximum schedule, one that could be reduced by productivity gains, strategic investments and partnerships, and Raymond, maybe even windmills. The first increase will come in 2010 and will be 50%. 3 other increases of up to 50% will come in successive 4-year intervals ending in 2022. In addition, there will be an annual cost of living adjustment. We need to put this toll schedule, however, into some historical perspective. Toll rates have never kept pace with inflation or the obvious capital needs of the roadways. Parkway tolls haven't been increased since 1989. The first and only time the tolls went up on the Parkway, a gallon of gas was $1.13, a movie ticket was $4, and almost no one had cell phones or email. The world changes. traffic grows, populations shift. I know the public is going to hear a lot of crazy numbers about what it will cost to drive on Turnpike in 50 years, 75 years, maybe even 1,000 years. Here's what really matters. Cost of an average trip on the Turnpike, just 3 exits. Under the proposal, in 5 years, that trip will be $2.05. In 10 years, it will be $5.80. By comparison, the average trip today is $1.21. Before critics rush to judgment, this toll schedule needs to be contrasted with equally robust alternatives of tax increases or budget cuts that would produce the same results. What we do know with certainty is that to fix only the toll road bridges and only widen the Turnpike will take at least a 45% increase in tolls, or $1.75 for an average Turnpike trip. By comparison, we know to accomplish even this limited objective would take at least a 12-cent hike in the gas tax. Both of these options fail to achieve our broader goals of paying down half of the state debt, funding the TTF for 75 years, and providing for necessary capital investments on the Turnpike, the Parkway, and the Atlantic City Expressway. Accomplish these broader goals would require a 20% across-the-board increase in income taxes. I'm not recommending that. The 20% increase would be a permanent one and apply to every taxpayer, not just millionaires. If people think that it's too burdensome, that one's too burdensome, we could instead levy a 30% increase in the sales tax. And if you don't like the first two options, we could propose an increase in the gas tax of about 45 to 50 cents. I think it's clear if we were to pursue any of these tax alternatives, we'd lead the league in the chosen category. If we were to achieve our robust objectives through spending cuts, it would take an annual recurring $2.5 billion cut in addition to the cuts we're proposing for this year's budget. That's $5 billion, folks, 15% of the budget. Of course, there are many combinations of these revenue raisers and cuts we could consider. That said, I believe all of these options are bad for our economy, would drive our tax burden drastically higher, or impossibly damage the ability of the government to fund schools, provide property tax relief, or public safety and welfare. Do the numbers. I have. Please, let's not insult each other or the public with empty rhetoric about that we can pay down the debt and fund transportation improvements if we just cut more spending and get rid of all waste, fraud, and abuse. We will cut spending. We will direct trust fund monies to their proper place. We will challenge fraud and raise accountability standards. And we will end spending limits. But pigs will fly over the State House before there's a realistic level of new taxes or spending cuts that can fix this mess. With that in mind, there are real issues at stake. The Transportation Trust Fund runs out of money in 3 years, and there's little to no room to do any more borrowing. The widenings on the Parkway and the Turnpike have been promised. The bridges throughout the state have to be repaired. The Hudson Tunnel is critical. Structural deficit must be closed. So, if you all refuse to accept the toll road schedule, I ask you to present an alternative. Now, I fully appreciate the challenge of getting one's mind around these various options. And I expect you to walk out here and say, I'm signed up. That's why there'll be 21 town hall meetings in 21 counties. That's why we'll have an open, honest, public dialogue with all of you over the next 2 months. So how does the toll road plan work? Who's accountable? Let me first say the plan's unique. We went to school on the experiences of other states and improved what we saw wrong with their proposals. Here are the basics. Roadways that will be affected are the Turnpike, the Parkway, the Atlantic City Expressway, and a small piece of Route 440. Flat out, the roadways will not be sold, leased, or anything else to a for-profit or foreign operator. Flat out. They'll continue to be owned by the state of New Jersey. A New Jersey nonprofit public benefit corporation will be formed for the purpose of managing, not owning, the day-to-day operations of the roads. We call this a Public Benefit Corporation, or PBC, because all of the benefits the new corporation earns are expressly dedicated for the public use. The new PBC will have its own independent, non-political board of directors. The PPC and the state will create a concession agreement that dictates all of the conditions of its operations and obligations. This is the governance plan. The terms and conditions for current employee contracts will remain unchanged. Prevailing wage and competitive contracting procedures will be retained. The agreement will include a specific listing of all the capital projects that must be met and establish triggers that will result in additional projects being developed. The operating standards for the roads will be specified in the agreement and monitored by the State Department of Transportation. All safety maintenance, roadway standards will be delivered at current or improved levels. This means that snow removal, pothole repair, emergency assistance, garbage cleanup, the same high standards we know today. State police will continue to patrol the roadways, and environmental rules will still apply. There'll be significant financial penalties if any of the agreed upon standards are not met. With respect to the financial aspects of the plan, the initial payment of the monies raised will be contractually dedicated to state debt reduction and to transportation improvements. Any future payments above and beyond operating costs and capital needs of the roadway will be reinvested in transportation improvements across the state. This is really the point that is different about our model. Under this plan, any future financial benefits from the roadway stays exclusively in New Jersey to be used for the benefit of the citizens and motorists of New Jersey. It's our estimate that the PBC will be able to raise between $32 and $38 billion based on our concession agreement, toll schedule, traffic projections, and current debt market conditions. The use of proceeds from the amount raised by the PBC are $10 billion to eliminate existing debt on the toll roads and to create the appropriate bond reserves, $4 billion in capital reserves for the toll road improvements and widenings, and an upfront payment in the range of $18 to $24 billion to reduce state debt and fund transportation improvements. Just like the Turnpike and the Parkway do today, the PPC will borrow funds based on the identified and dedicated revenues of tolls, just as commonly practiced for toll roads and ports all across the globe. Let me be clear, PBC borrowing isn't state borrowing. There's no general obligation. There's no moral obligation. Part of the state of New Jersey for the debt of the PBC. The bonds issued are not state debt in any way, shape, or form. So that's the restructuring plan. It's a plan to restore the financial health of our great state while meeting vital transportation needs. It's a plan to restore the public's confidence in government's ability to manage its finances. And it's a plan to meet our collective responsibilities. It works financially by providing the resources for our state to restructure our fiscal foundation while placing real limits on borrowing and spending in the future. The combination of the four elements will transform New Jersey's finances from a basket case to a solid foundation for facing our future. Above all, it changes the rules of the game. The rules have to change, considering the damage the status quo has brought. The culture that created one of the nation's highest debt burdens must end. The fiscal practices of the past have exacted a high price on our taxpayers' wallets and in their trust of government. When the first $1,000 in taxes our citizens pay goes to debt and principal instead of teachers and doctors, something is very wrong. We're making fewer investments in our future each passing year, and it is a direct result of growing debt crowding out our capacity to meet citizens' needs. The crowding out is already painful. Just look at the condition of our mental health institutions, our hospitals, the circumstances of those who look to the hope of stem cell research, or our basic infrastructure. We can't allow what gets crowded out to be the only choices we make. This isn't just a rhetorical game of chicken or gotcha. There's a truck barreling down the road. If you don't fix it under my watch, you'll fix it under someone else's. It should have been stopped long ago, that truck, but instead it's just picking up speed. This June, our National Guardsmen won't be debating why America is in Iraq when they stand up for duty. They won't push the responsibility onto somebody else. They will serve, and they will serve with pride. We too should serve with pride. We owe our guardsmen and every citizen no less. Let's live up to the good sense and high standards of our people as a motivation to do the right thing. This is a problem for all of us to face. Fixing the fiscal foundation is all of our responsibilities. Republicans and Democrats, the legislature, and the governor, working together for the common good. It's my expectation that over the next 2 months we can review and debate the details, but we must come to judgment by the middle of March so that we can go forward responsibly in the new fiscal year. This is a comprehensive, sober proposal. Controversial, most certainly, but it goes to the heart of our state's fundamental challenge. 1, plan 4 elements. 1, freeze spending now. 2, limit future spending to revenue growth. 3, capture the enterprise value of our tollways to pay down debt and make capital investments. 4, limit borrowing by requiring voter authorization. If there's a better plan, I'm open to its consideration. Put it on the table. I have said this proposal isn't a political platform. It's not something I want to do. It's something we have to do. The proposal is a solution to restore the state's financial integrity, health, and capacity. That's why I'm interested in a real solution that delivers what it promises. I think that's why the voters elected me. I know that's why I sought the opportunity. Let's return the state of our state to a position where our finances and governance match the extraordinary quality of our people. God bless New Jersey. God bless America.
Governor Jon Corzine has just finished his second State of the State address. He's being greeted and congratulated by legislative colleagues, former governors, as he makes his way out of the Assembly chamber. Chief Justice Stuart Rabner, the other justices of the state Supreme Court, the governor laid out his long-awaited asset monetization plan, a plan he actually first conceptually talked about a year ago in this same room, in this same speech. He said the state is undergoing a full-fledged financial emergency, and so he proposed 4 toll hikes of 50% each. The first one in 2010, and then 4 years later in 2014, then 2018, then 2022. Selling bonds against those toll hikes would bring in, he said, between $32 and $38 billion immediately, or within a year. They would be used to pay down debt and acknowledge and finance transportation funding. There's a prayer going on behind me. So, Kent, let's go back to you.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll turn now back to our political insiders. Here with me in our NJN studios, Republican analyst Roger Bodman and Democratic analyst Julie Roginsky for their reactions to the governor's speech. You heard the governor speak, and Michael wrapped us up a little bit on some of what the governor called for in this very complicated asset monetization plan he has spoken about. He's also proposed a freeze on state spending. Your reactions, and Roger, to start with you, liabilities in this as you see them. What is your reaction?
I think the governor made a good case, but it's a tough sell. I mean, he clearly speaks to his strength, and he comes out of the financial world. I think it's one of the reasons he was elected. I think he believes that. He made reference to that he's a financial expert. You know, I think he expressed by his somber tone, and I think all of us agree that the mess that we're in is unfortunate, that we are borrowing money regardless of whether it's from a toll hike or from whatever source, for today's needs, and we're putting that burden on tomorrow's generations. I mean, it's just an awful situation to be in. But having said that, I think that he's going to have to go around this state in some great detail and explain why this is the only option. But he did lay down the gauntlet, and that is if his opponents, be they Republicans or Democrats or a combination of both, don't like this, they have to come up with something else.
This is a complicated position to put you both in because the governor's been at this for a year, and we've just gotten the details. There have been some leaks over the past few days, but we've specifically gotten the details of the plan. And Julie, the implications of this, the liabilities.
Well, first, let me just say I've known Jon Corzine for almost 10 years, and I worked for him in the Senate. I worked in his first senatorial campaign. I have never seen Jon Corzine give a better speech, and the reason for that, I think, is because he's most comfortable talking about issues. He's not really a natural politician. I think you'll agree that this was a great speech for him because I think he really passionately feels very strongly that we have to do something. The political implications for him are huge. If he does as good a job selling this to 21 counties and to the voters over the next 6 months as he did today, I think he's got a shot. But again, as Roger said, he's put the burden on the legislators and on anybody else to say, if you've got here's the problem we face, here's the dire situation that we've been in. I don't want to blame it on Christie Whitman. I'm sure you don't want to blame it on Jim McGreevey and Democratic governors. It's a bipartisan mess that we've gotten into.
We can argue about how we got into this mess.
But that's not the issue.
The fact is we're there.
The issue is that we're in this mess. I think everybody will agree we're in this mess, and we need to get out of this mess. His biggest applause line, one of his biggest applause lines, was that he said we need long-term restructuring. It's not a 5-year plan, it's a 50-year plan. That was a bipartisan applause line, I noticed, because people realize we cannot continue this gimmick. He's right, it is Groundhog Day.
Julie, it's a make it or break it. Brigid said this at the top of the program here. It's a make it or break it speech for Governor Corzine.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it is also it's a turning point in his administration. Mind you, he's got 2 years left in his term. He said at the League of Municipalities a number of weeks ago that he was going to lay his governorship on the line for this, and apparently he is. And it's, as I say, it's a tough sell because the people don't appreciate, as he said rightfully, that people are concerned about this budgetary mess, about these fiscal implications. They don't trust their government leaders, including him and the Republicans for that matter, to solve this at this point in time. And he's got to go out there and say, yeah, this is the right thing, and more importantly, this is the only plan that'll work. And that's a very
But in his
difficult
defense, when was the last time you saw a politician go out and give a speech without any gimmicks, without any spin, and essentially said, you know what, we're in deep trouble. And so I think voters may appreciate that, hopefully.
Well, and it's such a complicated plan to understand, so thus the plain speak of this. But the devil, as you said before, is always in the details. Can the legislature guarantee to put a lockbox on the savings that come out of this?
You can't guarantee anything.
That's exactly the problem. Listen, there are a number of things in the speech that Republicans will like. They'll like the freeze on spending. They'll certainly like the spending controls. They'll like the limits on future borrowing. Obviously, the devil is in the details in all of those things, and they'll want to know exactly how those things work to make sure it's comprehensive enough and goes far enough to ensure fiscal integrity going forward so we don't find ourselves in this mess again. But there are components of this that they will like, which starts to right the ship of state. But can anybody put a limit? Are there constitutional? Listen, we have a constitutional portion of our state constitution now that says the voters have to approve all borrowing. But obviously that's not the case. So clearly they're going to want to look at the wording of these things and make sure that it's comprehensive enough and goes far enough to ensure that we don't get in this mess again.
Should the voters be given the opportunity to look at this issue as well?
They very well might have to be. I think we rejected INR before on issues like this. I think the governor was elected to do something, so is the legislature.
Julie, some of the critics will say that if he's going to borrow $38 to $40 billion or 32 to 38, I guess is the number they're saying.
The specific number the governor's saying.
Right.
He's not borrowing it, though, he claims.
Whatever, but it's a part of the government.
That's an important distinction.
But the question is does
he's
that issue go before the voters? In other words, if he's saying all borrowing ought to go before the voters, does that issue itself go before the voters?
Except that he, of course, is saying, Roger, that he disagree with you. This is not new state borrowing.
I understand that, Julie, but yes. I think that's a fine point. You and I may understand. I think if you go before the voters and they say, if it's not you, it's a public corporation that the state created, it's borrowing money, we're not borrowing it, that's the fine line.
I'm not disagreeing with you that, yes,
again,
it's a
the
fine
details.
That's true. It's all detailed.
Right.
Listen,
exactly.
He's going to have, this is a speech, he was given an opportunity to speak for almost an hour, I believe, and he's going to have to do this. but he's not going to be able to do it in a speech. He's going to have a dialogue, and that's where his difficulties begin. He's going to have to hear from the voters and the legislators.
We're going to pick up on that dialogue, Julie and Roger, because we're going to take a short break. First, we're going to come back with more coverage on the governor's State of the State address and the Republican response to the governor's speech when we come right back in just a few minutes, so do stay with us. Hello and welcome back to NJN's coverage of Governor Corzine's State of the State address. Just about 5 minutes ago, the governor finished delivering his State of the State speech to a joint session of the legislature gathered at the State House. We're going to go back there now, where senior political correspondent Michael Aron is standing by with the Republican response to the governor's speech. Michael?
That's right, Ken. I am with the two leaders of the minority parties in the legislature, the minority caucuses, Senator Tom Kean, the newly named leader in the Senate, named today, voted in today, and Assemblyman Alex DeCroce, who's been the leader for what, about 4 years, 6 years?
It's my third term.
Third term, okay. Senator Kean, you referred to this plan even before you heard the speech today as the brashest gimmick of all in your remarks, accepting your appointment to be the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. Do you still feel that way?
Absolutely. I've got great concerns. Over the last 6 years, the Democratic majority has forced through 94 tax increases, doubling the amount of borrowing, dramatically by 50% increasing the amount of spending in the state of New Jersey. And now the governor, no matter what he calls it, is now putting through a plan that is going to borrow another $30 to $40 billion, and it's going to be paid for by the largest tax increase, a new road tax on the hard-working citizens of this state. I've got great concerns that this is simply pushing the hard decisions that need to be made out for future generations to pay.
He says, excuse me, Assemblyman, I'll get to you in 1 second, but he says it's not new state debt. It's this public benefit corporation's debt. It doesn't obligate the state in any way.
It's paying off the Visa card with an American Express. It doesn't matter what you call it, but in the end, the taxpayers of this state will be paying massively higher increases in tolls, including a 50% increase in tolls immediately following the next general election cycle in this state on the state level. So after the governor's attempt at re-election, it's not going to take effect, and it's going to increase by 50% every 4 years thereafter. And then on top of that, it's a massive amount of new spending coming into the state. The governor's saying he wants to hold spending flat, which is different than the way he's been doing for the last, and the Democratic majority has done for the last 5 to 6 years, but there's been massive increases in spending. We need to start on spending cuts. We need to start on focus on ways that government can actually live within its means.
We'll get back to that in a second. Assemblyman, your reaction to the plan. We spoke yesterday on camera and you were critical going in. Still critical?
Well, you have to be critical because obviously we haven't seen the entire plan. The fact of the matter is, from what I hear of the plan, the little bit that we've gotten, we're going to be giving all of this money to a so-called private group of people who will be operating a public benefit program, they call it. I don't know how many people will be involved. They will be paid, I'm told.
It'll be like a corporate board. They'll get I don't know, what does a board member get, $25,000 a year or something like that?
I have no idea. In fact, in New Jersey, they sometimes pay more than private sectors. But in any event, the fact remains that I think Tom's right. The debt still becomes New Jersey's because should they fail, New Jersey takes it back. And we have to then pay off the debt. Now, in the meantime, who's going to be paying for it? The citizens of New Jersey. Yeah, there are people who come from out of state and use our roadways, 20-25%, but not every day of the week. And most of the people use that roadway to go back and forth to work, whether it's the Turnpike or the Garden State Parkway or the Expressway.
Roger Bodman on our broadcast referred to you having put forward, I think he said $2 billion to $2.5 billion worth of budget cuts over the years. I thought it was more like $1.5 billion. Whatever the number, the governor here today said pigs will fly over the State House before we're able to solve our financial problems through budget cuts or new taxes. Your response to that?
He's never really wanted to listen to our budget proposals. He's never accepted the cuts that we have proposed and given to him, by the way. I think we gave him a little over $2.5 million the first year, about $1.6 million last year. If he even used half of it, we could have had $800 million more we could have put into even property tax relief or into a program to fund our road improvements here, there, and everywhere.
I think he said that we would need to cut state spending eventually by 15%, cut the state budget by 15% if we didn't do this plan. Is that tolerable?
Well, that's meeting what the governor's objectives are. The goal that we need to focus on is a bipartisan basis, is to start with zero-based budgeting. Find out what is the state government spending money on.
Well, wait a second.
Look at the amount.
What you said, that's accepting his goals. Do you accept his goals? He said his goals are to reduce state debt by half and to guarantee a steady stream of resources for transportation improvements looking out 75 years. Are those worthy goals?
We should not have engaged in these debt issuances to begin with.
Well, that's spilled milk.
In trying to make sure that we didn't have this type of massive amount of borrowing and massive increases in spending. Certainly we need to cut debt. Certainly we need to control spending. We need to work on a bipartisan basis to ensure we identify spending cuts and ways to make sure the state actually lives within its means. Right now, that has not occurred over the last decade. And what I will work with and what Leader DeCroce will work with is making sure that Republicans and Democrats alike work together to make sure that we have a state that lives within its means. But that does not mean to simply outsource $30 to $40 billion of essentially new borrowing that will then have an opportunity to be filled in on an annual basis by new programs in the state budget. The governor is saying he wants to hold spending flat. If he's saying he wants to take $1 billion or more out of the state debt every year on budget, that's flat. That means the governor's increasing spending by $1 billion a year. We cannot afford these shell games any longer. And the end result is it's going to be the people in New Jersey who are going to be hit by a massive new road tax that the likes of which this state and this country have never seen before, on top of the 94 new taxes that have been put on the people of New Jersey over the course of the last 6 years.
You emphasize you want to work on a bipartisan basis. This wasn't a particularly partisan speech. He too called for bipartisan support, and he said he wants to put a bipartisan group together to advise him on how to cut the budget.
Well, I look forward to working with the governor, with the Senate President, with the Speaker of the Assembly, with my colleague Alex DeCroce on a bipartisan basis. Unfortunately, the members of the Republican Party weren't even afforded the opportunity, unlike the members of the majority party, to receive a copy of the speech today as the governor was giving his speech. We need to truly work on a bipartisan basis. The people of New Jersey this last November sent a very strong message that they want the government to solve the problems, but do so living within their means. This plan means massive new spending and new taxes.
Do you agree with him on the goals of cutting state debt in half and funding transportation improvements in a dedicated fashion?
I agree with him in cutting the state debt in half, but I also agree that before we do any indebtedness, we should go to the voters and indicate to them exactly what we're going to do and get their endorsement as to whether or not we should be going that far.
He said that if you don't do this, to achieve his goals, you'd need to hike the state income tax 20%. Obviously, nobody is for that, but it assumes that you embrace his goals. Are you saying you don't embrace his goals?
Well, let me say this to you. We have not seen a full text of his proposal. I certainly don't embrace the entire program.
You're getting briefed at Drumthwacket on Thursday. Is that correct?
No, I don't know that. We may or may not be. I think it's Friday where it may be briefed. But the fact remains, until we see the entire program, until we understand where it's going, who's going to be paying for this, I really can't give you full judgment as to whether I embrace any of his goals.
How about hiking the tolls 50% 4 different times over the next 18 years? the Transportation Commissioner said to reporters today at a briefing that this is just basically keeping up with inflation in all areas of life, and somehow toll roads.
The guy, he ought to tell that to the fella that uses those roads to go back and forth to work. He ought to tell it to the fella that has to pay $50 to fill up his gas tank every day, and then has to worry about how much is it going to cost him just to drive back and forth to his job and back to his home, to his family. I don't think that's all as good as it sounds.
It's also not only a new increase, 50% increase every couple of years, there's also the inflation increase built into those numbers. So this is
which, by the way, would not kick in until every 4 years. The tolls wouldn't go up every year. 4 years worth of cost of living adjustments would be made in the fourth year.
In the end, this would be, over the period of this process, and nearly an 800% increase on the tolls just on the turnpike. And think about, as Alex was talking about, what the people who are driving the turnpike and the parkway, Route 440 will have tolls for the first time in its history, the Atlantic City Expressway, what those massive new tolls will do on their lives and their livelihoods. Also, think about the cost of the goods and services as the products that New Jerseyans enjoy and purchase will go up. Those costs will go up. Also, think about, as happened in the past when tolls have increased, what will happen to our local roadways as truckers and other commuters and many other people go on local roads, whether they be Route 130, Route 295, roads across this state, to avoid the massive new tax increases, because again, this is going to be a massive new road tax that's going to impact New Jerseyans of all ages.
The Transportation Commissioner was asked about that today. He said that estimates are that the diversion off of the toll roads would be about 10% of the traffic volume, but that most of it would occur at non-peak hours. In other words, the local roads could handle it because at peak hours, everybody's trying to get to where they want to the fastest.
Well, what the Minority Leader and I are looking forward to reviewing those traffic estimates. We have asked, just this morning, we have asked the governor for copies of the environmental estimates, the traffic estimates, the numbers at which this has been based on. As you well know, over the course of this past year, many individuals even had to go to court to try to get the governor to go public with what this proposal is. And even today, we have not seen it. So today, Minority Leader DeCroce and I have asked the governor, well, finally, we refuse this in court. Let's have this information to go forward. But in the end,
you want the consultant study? Is that what you're?
We want the consultant study. We want the environmental study. We want to see firsthand what the impact on our local roads are. We want to see firsthand what the impact is on local commuters and on individuals who are going around the course of their lives on a daily basis. This will be a massive new tax increase on every citizen of the state of New Jersey, guaranteed increase of 800% on these tolls.
Let me ask you this. The governor used the phrase full-fledged financial emergency in his remarks today. Do you agree that we have a full-fledged financial emergency?
Well, because of the spending that they've been doing over the last 6 years, I do believe that we're in an emergency situation. However, over the last 6 years, we have proposed cuts consistently, maybe not to the tune of the amount of increases that they propose, but we have indicated to them we could give them anywhere between $4 and $6 billion worth of cuts over these last several years. They just never were willing to accept them and just wanted to continue their spending, whether it be on schools, whether it be on school construction, road programs, or whatever it may have been.
What's your view on whether we have a full-fledged financial emergency on our hands?
The state is certainly in extraordinarily difficult times, and that's why we need the courage to make the tough decisions. But the tough decisions do not necessarily mean a massive new borrowing scheme. We have seen that on the tobacco bonds, where actually over $3 billion was sucked up in state spending over the course of 2 years. Where the Governor Corzine's own previous transportation trust fund was an irresponsible measure when he renewed it just a couple of years ago that is adding to the debt, $6 billion in and of itself, just done 2 years ago. We need to work on a bipartisan basis because people in New Jersey deserve that.
It sounds as if there is no room in the Republican caucus for compromise on this.
Well, I don't say that. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say either one of us are not willing to compromise. We're willing to compromise as long as he's willing to listen to our concerns with expenditures. We don't have a revenue problem in the state of New Jersey. We have an expenditure problem. These are people who like to consistently spend, and we have a problem with that. And that's why we propose cuts from time to time, which they have rarely ever accepted.
Could you see yourself accepting a variation on this plan?
I'm willing to listen to the governor's proposal when we sit down with him on each of the next several Fridays and talk to him about it. I don't know if it'd be something we could accept until we see the plan and really thoroughly understand it.
Quickly, can you see a possible negotiation on this?
There are 17 members of the Republican caucus in the state Senate who are excited to focus on the future of the state of New Jersey, and we're willing to work with partners, Republican or Democrat alike, to make the state more affordable for the hardworking citizens of this state.
Senate Republican Leader Tom Kean, Assembly Republican Leader Alex DeCroce, thank you both very much. That is the Republican response to Governor Corzine's State of the State message. The governor laying out his long-awaited asset monetization, now known as the Financial Restructuring Plan. I'm Michael Aron in the Assembly Chamber. Let's go back to Kent Manahan. Kent?
Thank you so much, Michael. Back here in our NJN studios, Roger Bodman, Julie Roginsky. As we wrap up our broadcast, let me raise an issue. The governor wants to create a nonprofit corporation to float $32 to $38 billion in bonds. What about the professional fees involved in floating these bonds and the costs involved in that, the legal fees and the financial institution fees, right, perhaps even Goldman Sachs to get the contract to put these bonds forward where the governor formerly worked? I'm using that only as an example.
I know that. I would hope and I would expect that those professionals would be hired on a competitive basis, on a transparent basis. That if in fact this thing goes forward, that the professionals, be they the underwriting firms or the legal firms that are necessary to put forth the deal, would be hired on not on a political basis but on a basis that's,
but on the cost involved in doing this on $32 to $38 billion.
It is what it is.
Would be an astronomical fee. You would assume. I've heard in the hundreds of millions of dollars, approaching $1 billion in fees alone.
Well,
Julie,
there's never been an underwriting, to my knowledge, certainly of this scope and size.
So we're laying whole new groundwork.
Well, you're investing money to make money, I guess, is the way he's going to look at it. Look, the governor was a bond trader himself. He knows exactly what these kinds of deals entail, and I think the bond trades that he did, or the bond deals that he did, probably exceed or are very similar to the ones that he's doing here as governor. Of course, I mean, he's going to say that we're going to have to get the best people. The best people may not work pro bono. I mean, they never do. So, but he's going to say this is an investment we need to make in order to get a return, a better return on our money. I think it's interesting that both Tom Kean and Alex DeCroce completely deride this plan, not really having seen it yet. But I'd love to know, Tom Kean living in Westfield or Alex DeCroce living in Morris County, their roads are collapsing just the same way roads all over the state are collapsing. How's Tom Kean going to get to Trenton from Westfield without more infrastructure improvements, more money put on our roads? I mean, how is Alex DeCroce going to get from Morris County? Enough with the naysaying, enough with the gimmicks. I think it's offensive that Tom Kean said this was a gimmick, where in fact, I think it's incredibly, incredibly sincere of the governor to put forward a very painful but necessary, in his view, plan. So enough with the politics. I think if they're real leaders and really want to do something for the state of New Jersey rather than run political campaigns, they need to sit down with the governor and come to some sort of accommodation. Maybe this isn't exactly what they're going to end up getting, but they need to work with the governor rather than standing up and politically grandstanding.
Many months ahead of selling this to the people of New Jersey on behalf of the governor, and cooperation from the legislature as well. Roger Bodman, Julie Roginsky, of course, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and sharing your perspective on the governor's State of the State address and his asset monetization plan. And that concludes our coverage of the governor's State of the State address. We'll have more on the governor's speech on NJN News coming up at 6 and 7:30 and 11 o'clock tonight. I'm Kent Manahan. Thank you so much for being with us.